Hello, everyone. Thank you. I'm Zakaria. I'm from Morocco. Thank you for this great opportunity. I'm so happy and honored for being here to learn more and share knowledge. I believe that hope is the driving force that transforms visions into reality. And through the inspiring interventions of today's speakers and panelists, we are reminded of its power in shaping today's sustainable cities and communities. Because I believe that cities and communities of today's are the shelters where we live. I have a question, please, as a PhD student in architecture and urban planning, but also as an architect and urbanist and project officer of content and training at the Local Pathways Fellowship at the United Nations Sustainable Development Solution Network's Youth Initiative. For Daniela and all the speakers, how can we advocate for nature-based solutions where investors do often look to the short-term return on investments rather than a long-term one, knowing that some nature-based solutions in the common conception are thought to be more expensive than traditional industrial solutions? Thank you.
Thank you, Zakaria. That's a very, very good question. And I'm happy that it came up because I think we're discussing a lot. I guess with nature-based solutions, we're getting better at designing business models around it so that the investors kind of like jump into it. There is, though, a lot of, we have to be very honest about timing. So nature-based solutions, they take time to provide the ecosystem services. So you cannot compare what a mature tree can deliver with what a very, very freshly planted tree can deliver. So there's a huge difference. So time has to be factored in. But on the other hand, the co-benefits that nature-based solutions can deliver are so plural and so multiple. And I think that the whole narrative has to be around the co-benefits. So if you have a great infrastructure that's going to deliver you a function, it's usually monofunctional. NBS, they are multifunctional by design. You know, they will deliver. So if you have a park, they will deliver better air quality, a lot of benefits to health, a lot of benefits in terms of flood mitigation, also in terms of going against droughts. So, you know, all of this has to be factored in. And it's a whole matter of seeing this business model in the long term and with the different benefits that you can gain out of NBS. And just before I pass the word, I would like to hear you, Martin, what do you have to say there as well? I think that it's also a matter of education. You know, the EIB, the European Investment Bank, has put up a big report 2 years ago, 2022, on investment on NBS, and has analyzed actually the state of play. And what we learned from that report is that a lot of time we really need to step up all the narratives, you know, and all the communication tools with this sector, and we need to get the insurance sector also to play with us. Right? Because, of course, you can lower the premiums if you have more stable ecosystems, right? Because they're not interested in having disasters and having to pay for the disasters. So, you know, it's all a matter of narrative and working together so that we can be safer and have better cities and better environments. And yeah, so I guess the nature positive economy is a bit of a way to go. But for that, we really need to have more education and better narratives to get people to get out of the kind of economy we have today.
Yeah, it's a super question. Actually, I pick up something Daniela said earlier, but the peatlands are working for free. We have to give them a voice, you know. These are things we have to put a value on. We're destroying them, and if we don't put a value on them, we won't protect them. There are natural capital funds, which significant. We have one which is around 1.5 billion, so it's not insignificant. But if you look at the kind of investments that need to be made globally, not enough people are putting enough money into these things. The other thing I wanted to mention is protecting nature in real time. After big events, extreme events, we damage nature a lot. And what we fail to do is react in the moment. And I'll give you a good example. After a big storm event, coral reefs get covered with silt. And if you don't remove that silt within days, then all the sea life that relied on the reef never comes back. And I can also tell you that coral reefs support 90% of sea life. So if we don't protect them, we're going to destroy the ocean as well. And so we need to be cleverer at reacting in these moments to protect those natural assets, to protect the mangroves, the things that we rely on. We're also very good at trying to come up with some engineered, I'm an engineer, so it's always, I always think, well, there's an engineered solution for this. But nature does it so much better than we do. So if we don't protect nature, there's no way we're gonna do it. But so I think these in-the-moment investments that save long-term cost and long-term loss, for me, is really key.
Thank you, Zach, for the question. I think when we look at the knowledge and understand nature-based solutions, at least in Australia, we have been collaborating with the oldest living civilization in the world, which is our Australian Aboriginal people. How we work with them and have that knowledge in terms of they have survived the changes to our climate. Yes, not necessarily human-induced, but they have that knowledge and they have the skill set in terms of the types of ecology-based solutions. And they've been practicing this for thousands and thousands of years. Through my work at the City of Sydney, I had the honour of passing in the council chamber in government our new urban forest strategy. We know that in the city, our London plane trees, which provide the solution of shade in summer, but then it loses its leaves in winter to provide solar access, which is much needed. There's no one species that can replace that, and they're going to all die in 2050 because of humidity and rising temperatures of Sydney. We know that, and there's no one species that can do that low-tech solution work. So what we've come up with is 3 species that we're now starting to plant along our streets. It will take 20 to 25 years, even more, to mature in terms of the type of grey, in terms of the important critical infrastructure, green infrastructure that's equally as important to our grey infrastructure. And I've been in community meetings talking to local businesses with shop fronts, and they think the city is just beautifying the streets. They ask, why are we taking away their on-street car parking when their customers need it to shop? And my response has always been, this is actually critical infrastructure that we're putting in terms of rainwater gardens, swales, water-sensitive urban design, to ensure that your shop and your businesses aren't flooding, that we can be resilient, that we're being proactive and designing that city that can survive and be part of 2025 and beyond, even to 2050. And from an architectural perspective, there's a lot to learn in terms of how we can build practice into this professionally. In Australia now, for the past 6-7 years, every single architecture school now has a professor of Indigenous education, a deputy dean focusing on how we design for country, how we care for country. Every single architect, including myself, we have to do 1 year of formal training every single year to maintain our accreditation on how we look at Indigenous design and the Indigenous ecology of the context of where we're working on. So I think that's a really good practice in terms of how we can also transform a profession and the experts who are working in this field, who are trying to be allies in terms of our First Nations peoples.
Hi everyone, my name is Laura, and actually I have a question for Martin, but if anyone would like to answer, please feel free. So Martin, in your opinion, what are the key components needed to achieve a just transition towards sustainable cities, in the sense of truly leaving no one behind? Because talking about sustainability in a region that lacks of basic sanitation, for example, seems to be a step ahead of more urgent needs. So how you see these challenges?
That's a horrible question, thank you. It's a huge question. I think there are a number of ways to answer it. So you have mature cities that provide housing and energy and infrastructure and water infrastructure for their communities. So the key in those cities is to ensure that you keep these services affordable. And we sometimes forget that. We're racing to switch to renewable energies. In some places, we should just be careful and patient and ensure that we transition in a way that keeps people, with the provisions and basic services that they need. In other cities, the risks are much more imminent. So particularly some global south cities that are in very exposed coastal zones, they're now prone to flooding in ways that they never predicted. And they have to come up with something far more sophisticated. They have to think about funding long-term infrastructure solutions, otherwise people will just leave these places. And this is the worst thing that could happen. You've got the city of Shanghai, it's home to a lot of people, but they've raised $30 billion to invest in infrastructure purely to adapt this city to allow the businesses to operate, the people to thrive, the people to move on. So one thing I've learned in all my city travels, and I've worked with ICLE, with Daniela, and I've worked with C40, and I've worked with many, every city is different. So they need to figure out their unique approach to this. They need to think about how we adapt those cities in the future. It's actually something that AXA and Generali are doing. It's our business to think about future risk and to help prepare people for it. And I think cities are the best equipped, and William may have a view on it as well, but cities are best equipped to put in place the studies, the research, to collect the data, to make those arguments, to collect the funds far more than our national governments are able to do. So as I remain this conviction that being in city leadership is where you get the best visibility to how you reach a new future. I don't know if I answered your question, but I said something I thought was good.
I really see the next few years as being the rise of cities, not just only what Bessie said in terms of population growth, but also recognizing 75% of our global carbon emissions, rather, come from cities. But really, it's because where the cities and their local leaders are the first responders to the climate emergency. In terms of how we respond proactively, those types of solutions. But now we're finally having a seat at the table in terms of 2 years ago in Dubai at the COP, UN Climate Change Conference, cities were, and their mayors and governors were for the first time invited to negotiate with member states. And there's a recognition that countries aren't investing in the right infrastructure, they aren't taking communities seriously and that direct level of governance. And so that's going to become really critical, especially as our cities face more disasters locally that impact our citizens. I think we need to also touch on the idea of how we can really look at responding in this proactive way, but also in terms of just how we can create the right financing to support it. And so I think back to your question, it's just really up to us to ensure that we can have the capacity and to work with these national governments, but also in terms of seeing how we might be able to have a different multilateral system, and that's recognized through the Summit of the Future last year, and recognized through networks like ICLEI, C40, and the other cities working together. It's crazy to think 10 years ago at the Paris COP, 500 mayors were at Paris City Hall, an hour away from where the discussions were taking place. And they now are actually coming together and listening to our local leaders. And I think that's also where we get to play a role as well.
Thank you so much to our speakers. Because of time, we won't. This discussion of cities, I assure you, it's one of the most interesting, and we cannot finish it here. So let's corner these speakers somewhere on the corridors and continue the discussion. And also, we invite you as the Local Pathways Fellowship to, join us in helping more and more youth take action towards sustainable cities in their cities across the world. So just to conclude, I think, as I said, this conversation doesn't stop here, because whether you are an entrepreneur, whether you are a policymaker, whether you are an engaged citizen like me, or you are an activist or a change maker, there's a role for you to play in advocating for better cities where you live, whether it's for better policies, whether it's taking a small action, whether it's investing in nature-based solutions, or businesses that are actually ensuring risk, which is very new and nice. We all can do something, and we all can also also advocate for underrepresented voices, because cities are also very unequal. There are those who are enjoying their cities, but there are many who are not. So I think the call for us is that let's be aware of what cities can be, and the potential they hold in this discussion on sustainability. And with that, let us go out there more aware and do our best to advocate for better, smart, and more equal cities. Thank you.